Laura placed the black velvet jewelry box on the stainless steel counter of the Flourishing Crumb. It sat there, small and elegant, looking completely out of place next to the tray of cooling croissants. "Happy birthday, Alyssa," she said, her voice dripping with that specific kind of sweetness she reserved for public performances. "We thought it was time you moved on." I stared at the box. My apron was covered in flour, my hands smelled like yeast and burnt sugar, and my feet throbbed from standing for 6 hours straight. This was supposed to be my shift, but Laura had turned it into a spectacle. Behind her, Tyler, my husband of 3 years, held up his phone. He wasn't smiling at me. He was smiling at the screen, checking the angle, making sure the lighting caught the velvet just right. "Go ahead," Laura urged, her perfectly manicured hand gesturing toward the box. "Open it." The bakery went silent. My coworkers stopped kneading dough. A few regular customers paused mid-sip. Everyone watched. I reached out, my fingers leaving a faint dusting of flour on the velvet as I flipped the lid open. I expected a necklace, maybe earrings, a token gesture to smooth over the fact that they had forced me to serve them on my own birthday. It wasn't jewelry. Folded neatly inside, sharp edges pressing against the silk lining, were legal documents. At the top, in bold, unforgiving letters, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." My pulse didn't even spike. I didn't produce the tears Laura was clearly hoping for, the ones that would make Tyler's video go viral as the ungrateful wife breakdown. Instead, a cold, clinical clarity washed over me. It was like the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees, and suddenly, I could see everything perfectly. Laura's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. Tyler zoomed in, probably thinking I was in shock. I wasn't. I was calculating. I reached into the pocket of my apron and pulled out a black permanent marker. Without a word, I took the papers out of the box. I didn't read the terms. I didn't ask why. I placed them on the glass display case, right above the lemon tarts I had baked at 4 in the morning. The marker squeaked against the paper as I signed my name, Alyssa Vance. I capped the marker and slid the papers back across the glass toward Laura. "Thank you," I said. My voice was steady, calm, lethal. "This is actually the best gift you could have given me." I reached behind my neck and untied my apron. It fell to the floor in a heap of white fabric. I looked at Tyler, who had lowered his phone slightly, confusion clouding his face. Then I looked at Laura, who was staring at the signed papers like they were a bomb she didn't know how to defuse. "I'm not your daughter-in-law anymore," I said, loud enough for the entire bakery to hear. "And I'm not the head baker here anymore, either. I accepted the position as director of events at Sterling Heights an hour ago. My shift ends now." I grabbed my purse from under the counter and walked past them. I didn't look back. I walked out the door and into the cool afternoon air, leaving them standing there with a signed divorce, a black velvet box, and a bakery full of people who were suddenly very, very quiet. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. 3 hours earlier, I had unlocked the bakery doors, my stomach fluttering with a hope I knew was stupid. It was my 29th birthday. I had told myself I didn't expect a party. I didn't expect a gift. But part of me, that tiny, stubborn part that remembered being a 7-year-old foster kid waiting by the window for parents who never showed, still hoped for something. Maybe a quiet dinner. Maybe just a card that didn't feel like an obligation. Instead, I got a text from Laura. "Private event booked at the bakery tonight. 6 o'clock sharp. We need you to run the floor." I had arrived to find the bakery transformed. Not for me. For them. Laura had booked out the Flourishing Crumb, the place where I was head baker, the place I had built from a struggling corner shop into the city's premier artisanal bakery for a private family dinner. But the guest list was just 3 people: Laura, Tyler, and Olivia. And the staff? Just me. Alyssa. "The water glasses are empty," Olivia said, snapping her fingers without looking up from her phone. She was 26, wearing a dress that cost more than my car, and currently picking apart one of my signature almond croissants like it was contaminated. "Also, this pastry is dry," Did you even try today? I baked them fresh this morning. Olivia, I said, forcing my voice to remain neutral. I refilled her glass, my hand steady despite the heat rising in my cheeks. Well, maybe you were distracted, Laura chimed in. She was sitting at the head of the table, sipping her third glass of wine, thinking about other things. You know how you get, dear. Flighty. Tyler said nothing. He just ate the croissant Olivia had rejected, his eyes fixed on the table. I walked back to the counter, my chest tight. The bakery smelled of vanilla and burnt sugar, usually a comfort, but tonight it felt suffocating. The air was thick with the scent of Laura's expensive floral perfume, overpowering the honest warmth of the bread. It was a sensory invasion. They were occupying my sanctuary. As I wiped down the espresso machine, I caught my reflection in the chrome. Tired eyes, flour in my hair. A woman who had spent 5 years trying to buy her way into a family that only saw her as a servant. Why do I do this? The thought hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't a new question. But tonight, the answer felt different. I thought back to the day I met Tyler. I was 24, fresh out of the system, desperate for a place to belong. When he brought me home to meet Laura, she hadn't been cruel. She had been welcoming. She had talked about family traditions and legacy. I had been so hungry for those words. I thought I had found my home. I thought the criticism, the demands, the favors that turned into mandates, I thought it was just the tax I had to pay. The cost of admission to a real family. I thought if I worked hard enough, if I baked enough cakes, if I paid enough bills, eventually, the debt would be settled. Eventually, I would be one of them. Alyssa! Laura's voice cut through my thoughts like a knife. Olivia spilled her latte. It's dripping onto the floor. Honestly, can we get a mop? I looked over. Olivia was smirking, a puddle of brown liquid spreading across the pristine tile I had scrubbed on my hands and knees just yesterday. It wasn't an accident. The cup was tipped on its side, positioned perfectly at the edge of the table. I walked over with a rag. I knelt down. I wiped up the mess at their feet while they continued their conversation about their upcoming vacation to the Maldives. A vacation I wasn't invited to, but had undoubtedly helped fund through the rent I paid on their investment property. You missed a spot, Olivia said, pointing, with a manicured nail. I looked up at her, at the cruelty dancing in her eyes, and for the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel the desperate need to please her. I didn't feel the fear that they would cast me out. I felt bored. I stood up, holding the dirty rag. I'll get the mop, I said. My voice was calm. It sounded like someone else's voice. Someone stronger. As I walked to the back room, I passed the calendar on the wall. Today's date was circled in red marker. Alyssa's birthday, but underneath, in Laura's handwriting, it had been crossed out and replaced with family meeting. They hadn't forgotten. They had erased it. I leaned against the mop sink, the smell of bleach stinging my nose. That was the moment the chain broke, the invisible tether that had bound me to their approval, the desperate hope of the orphan child. It just snapped. I realized then that the debt wasn't real. I didn't owe them my dignity. I rinsed the rag, watched the brown water swirl down the drain, and made a promise to myself. This was the last mess of theirs I would ever clean up. When I walked back out to the dining room, Laura was pulling a small black velvet box from her purse. She placed it on the counter with a flourish. Alyssa, come here, she called out, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness again. We have a surprise for you. I walked toward them, not as a servant, but as a spectator. I watched Tyler pull out his phone. I watched Laura's eager smile, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever was in that box was going to be the end of everything. I drove my 2014 Honda Civic out of the parking lot, the engine sputtering slightly as I merged onto the main road. The car smelled of old coffee, and the vanilla air freshener I used to mask the scent of flour that clung to everything I owned. For years, I had hated that smell. It was the scent of exhaustion. But today, As I watched the bakery disappear in my rearview mirror, the air felt different. It felt clean. My phone buzzed in the passenger seat. Tyler, then Laura, then Olivia. I didn't look at the messages. I knew what they said. They would be variations of "come back," "stop being dramatic," and "how could you." I reached over and turned the phone off. The silence that filled the car was heavy, but it wasn't lonely. It was the silence of a balance sheet finally zeroing out. I thought about the last 5 years. I thought about the narrative they had built around me, that I was the charity case, the lucky girl Tyler had rescued from a life of instability. They loved to tell people how they took me in, how Laura gave me a job when no one else would, how I was part of the family, as long as I knew my place. But as I drove toward the highway, the mental ledger I had suppressed for so long began to unroll in my mind, cold and undeniable. Item 1. The apartment. Tyler and I lived in a sleek, 2-bedroom apartment in the trendy downtown district. Laura loved to brag to her friends that she had set us up there. The truth? The lease was in Tyler's name, but the rent came from my account. Every month. $2,400. Tyler's freelance graphic design career hadn't produced a paycheck in 14 months. I paid the rent so his mother wouldn't know her golden boy was broke. I paid it so I could pretend we were partners. Item 2. The debt. 6 months into our marriage, collectors started calling. Tyler had $12,000 in credit card debt he'd hidden from me. It was for business expenses, he'd lied, his eyes wet with panic. Mom can't know, Alyssa. It would kill her. So I drained my savings. The money I had scraped together from double shifts and side catering gigs, gone in a single wire transfer. I bought his silence. I bought his dignity. Item 3. The lifestyle. Olivia's influencer career was funded by my labor. Who baked the 3-tiered cakes for her photo shoots at 2 in the morning? Me. Who catered her launch parties for free, paying for the ingredients out of my own pocket because family supports family? Me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't a charity case. I was the host. I was the financier of their delusions of grandeur. They didn't hate me because I was beneath them. They hated me because they needed me. And they knew it. I pulled into a gas station and parked near the air pump. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of gasoline and asphalt. It was the most honest thing I had smelled all day. I turned my phone back on. The notifications flooded the screen like a dam breaking. 17 missed calls. 42 texts. I opened my banking app. My fingers moved with the precision of a surgeon. Scheduled transfer, rent, cancel. Scheduled transfer, Tyler's car payment, cancel. Autopay. Laura's investment property utility bill, cancel. I watched the transfer canceled confirmations pop up one by one. It wasn't revenge, it was a correction. I was simply deleting a clerical error that had persisted for 5 years. I scrolled down to the joint checking account. The balance was lower than it should have been. Tyler had been spending again. I transferred exactly half of what remained into my personal savings account, the one I had opened 3 days ago, the same day I got the job offer. I left him with $300 and a negative balance pending on the electric bill. Good luck, Tyler, I whispered to the empty car. I put the phone down and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The woman looking back at me wasn't the scared orphan anymore. She wasn't the tired baker. She was someone who had just realized that the only person she needed to save was herself. I put the car in drive. I had a cheap motel to find, a suit to buy, and a life to start. The Bank of Alyssa was officially closed. The motel room smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon polish. It was 2 towns over, cheap enough that I could pay cash without draining my meager savings, and anonymous enough that no one would think to look for me here. I sat on the edge of the lumpy mattress, my laptop open, my new suit hanging in the plastic-wrapped closet. It had been 4 days since I walked out of the bakery. 4 days of silence from me, and 4 days of absolute chaos from them. My phone, which I had kept on silent, was now vibrating so constantly it was sliding across the nightstand. I picked it up. The notifications were a wall of text, a digital scream demanding attention. Tyler 14, missed calls. Alyssa, pick up. My card was declined at the gas station. I'm stranded. This isn't funny. Laura, 8 missed calls. You walked out on a shift. That is abandonment. I can sue you for breach of contract. Call me immediately. Olivia, Instagram DM. You ruined Mom's birthday. I hope you're happy. Everyone is asking where you are. You're making us look bad. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel the old urge to fix it, to transfer money, to apologize and smooth things over. I felt like a scientist observing a volatile chemical reaction from behind safety glass. I opened TikTok. Olivia had posted a video 3 hours ago. She was crying. Perfect mascara tears rolling down her cheeks. The caption read, "When your sister-in-law ruins your mom's birthday surprise and abandons the family, number heartbroken number family drama." I watched it twice. In the background of her video, I could see the messy living room of the apartment I used to pay for. There were takeout boxes on the coffee table. No one had cleaned up. No one had cooked. The ecosystem was collapsing because the caretaker was gone. I scrolled to the comments. OMG, that's awful. Who does that? She sounds toxic. Babe, you're better off. They were controlling the narrative. They were painting me as the villain. A week ago, this would have crushed me. I would have been desperate to defend myself, to prove I was good. Now, it just confirmed everything I knew. They didn't miss me. They missed the convenience of me. My phone rang again. It was Tyler. I stared at the screen, watching his name flash. I could picture him perfectly standing at a pump, embarrassed, waiting for me to rescue him like I always did. I swiped to answer, but I didn't speak. Alyssa! His voice was high. Panicked. Thank God! Where are you? My card isn't working. The bank said the transfer was canceled. I need you to send money right now. I have a meeting in 20 minutes. I know, I said. My voice was calm in the quiet motel room. I canceled it. I canceled the transfer, Tyler. And the rent. And the car payment. Are you insane? He sounded more confused than angry. How am I supposed to pay for anything? You handle the bills. That's the deal. The deal is over, I said. You're 31 years old. Figure it out. Alyssa, stop. You're making a scene. Just come home, okay? Mom is furious, but I can talk to her. We can fix this. Just transfer the money and come home. I am home, I said, looking at my suitcase, at the cheap coffee maker, at the freedom that filled the cramped room. I'm not coming back, Tyler. The divorce papers are filed. My lawyer will be in touch. Lawyer? You don't have money for a lawyer. I do now, I said. Since I stopped paying for your life. I hung up. I blocked his number. Then I blocked Laura. Then Olivia. I stood up and walked to the closet. I ran my hand over the fabric of my new suit. It was navy blue, sharp, professional. It was the armor of a woman who was done being a victim. Tomorrow, I started at Sterling Heights. Tomorrow, I became someone else. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The face in the mirror looked tired, yes. But the eyes were clear. The fear was gone. Let them post their videos. Let them scream into the void. I had a job to do. The lobby of Sterling Heights Resort didn't smell like bleach or burnt coffee. It smelled of eucalyptus, crisp linen, and money. High ceilings stretched above me, light filtering through enormous glass windows that overlooked the ocean. Everything was quiet, efficient, and impeccably clean. I walked through the staff entrance, my heels clicking on the polished marble. I wasn't Alyssa the baker anymore. I was Alyssa Vance, Director of Events. Good morning, Miss Vance, the concierge said, nodding respectfully as I passed. Good morning, Robert, I replied. It still felt strange to be addressed with respect. Strange not to be invisible. Strange not to be waiting for someone to criticize my outfit or demand I clean up a mess they had made on purpose. I took the elevator to the executive floor. My office was in the corner, a spacious room with a mahogany desk and a view that cost more per night than my old apartment's monthly rent. I sat down, booted up my computer, and took a deep breath. This was my life now. Competence, authority, silence. I spent the morning reviewing the upcoming VIP schedule. Weddings, corporate retreats, charity galas. It was a complex puzzle of logistics and luxury. And I loved it. I loved the order of it. Then, around 11 in the morning, my assistant, Sarah, walked in with a thick file folder. "We have a flag on a booking for next month," she said, placing the file on my desk. "It's the Diamond Jubilee. The client has been difficult. They're demanding menu changes again, and the deposit is still pending final clearance." I froze. My hand hovered over the file. Diamond Jubilee. I opened the folder. The name on the contract stared back at me in elegant looping script. The Laura Van Doren Diamond Jubilee. My breath caught in my throat. Of course. Laura had been talking about this for a year. Her 60th birthday. Her coming out party to the elite social circle she was desperate to impress. She had bragged about booking Sterling Heights, claiming she had pulled strings to get the ballroom. I looked at the date. Next month. I looked at the notes from the previous events manager. Client is highly demanding. Requested complimentary upgrades based on social standing. Consistently late with vendor payments. I wasn't just her former daughter-in-law anymore. I was her event director. I flipped through the pages. The menu she had requested: lobster, Wagyu beef, vintage champagne, the decor imported orchids, crystal chandeliers. The total estimated cost was astronomical, far beyond what I knew Laura could actually afford without Tyler's and by extension, my financial support. And then, I saw it. The deposit receipt. It was marked pending, but there was a credit authorization form attached to hold the date. I stared at the form. A cold feeling started in my stomach and spread to my fingertips. The card on file was a Platinum Reserve. I knew that card. I had paid the bill for it every month for 3 years. It was in Tyler's name, but I was an authorized user. I had paid it off completely before I left, severing my connection to the account. But here it was, used to secure a $50,000 venue hold. I looked closer at the signature at the bottom of the authorization form. It was a scrawl, hurried and messy. It read, Alyssa Vance. The date next to the signature was 2 weeks ago. I sat back in my chair, the file heavy in my hands. The room suddenly felt very small. They hadn't just booked a party. They had used my name, my credit history, and my signature to do it. Laura didn't know I worked here. She didn't know I was the one reviewing this file. She thought she was just scamming a faceless corporation, using her daughter-in-law as collateral one last time. I picked up the phone. "Sarah," I said. My voice was calm, dangerously calm. "Get legal on the line and pull the security footage from the front desk for the day this form was submitted. I need to see exactly who dropped this off." I looked out the window at the ocean, churning and gray. They wanted a party. They wanted to be treated like royalty. Well, they were about to get the royal treatment. Just not the kind they expected. Sarah brought me the security footage within the hour. I watched it on my laptop screen, the grainy video playing in silent, jerky motion. The timestamp read 10:14 in the morning, 2 weeks ago. The automatic doors slid open. A woman walked in. She was wearing oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, trying too hard to look incognito, but ending up looking like a caricature of a spy. She approached the front desk, sliding a single sheet of paper across the marble counter to the receptionist. I paused the video and zoomed in. It was blurry, but I knew that walk. I knew the way she tilted her head, dismissive and arrogant even when asking for a favor. It wasn't Laura. It was Olivia. Laura hadn't even done the dirty work herself. She had sent her daughter to commit the felony. I leaned back in my chair, the realization settling over me like a heavy blanket. They hadn't just used my credit. They had impersonated me. Olivia had walked into this hotel, claimed to be Alyssa Vance, or at least an authorized representative, and handed over a forged document to secure a party she couldn't afford. I picked up the credit authorization form again. The signature was a clumsy attempt at my own, too loopy. The A too sharp. It was the kind of forgery you commit when you don't respect the person you're stealing from enough to even learn how they write. "Sarah," I said, pressing the intercom button, "get me the legal department and call the fraud division of my credit card company. I need to report unauthorized activity. Right away, Miss Vance." I looked at the file again. The Laura Van Doren Diamond Jubilee. It was a house of cards built on my credit score. They were planning to drink vintage champagne and eat lobster while I footed the bill, assuming I would just quietly pay it off like I always did. Assuming I was too weak, too scared, or too stupid to fight back. This wasn't just a toxic family dynamic anymore. This was a crime. I picked up the phone when legal connected. "This is Alyssa Vance," I said. "I have evidence of identity theft and credit card fraud involving a booking at our venue. The perpetrator is the client. We'll need to file a police report immediately," the lawyer said, his voice professional and detached. "Do you want to handle the cancellation now?" "No," I said. A cold, hard plan was forming in my mind. "Not yet. Let the reservation stand. They're coming in for a final tasting tomorrow. I want to handle this personally. Miss Vance, if there's fraud involved, we usually terminate contact immediately." "They don't know I work here," I interrupted. "They think they're walking into a party. I want them to walk into a reality check." There was a pause on the line. "Understood. We'll have security on standby." I hung up. I looked at the signature on the form one last time, Alyssa Vance. It was a lie. A forgery. But tomorrow, they were going to meet the real Alyssa Vance. And she wasn't signing checks anymore. She was signing eviction notices. The next day, I stood in the executive boardroom, flanked by our head of security and the resort's legal counsel. The room was imposing floor-to-ceiling windows, a mahogany table long enough to land a plane on, and a view that screamed power. At exactly 2 in the afternoon, the double doors opened. Laura swept in first, wearing a cream pantsuit and oversized sunglasses, looking every bit the queen surveying her new kingdom. Tyler trailed behind her, looking nervous, and Olivia brought up the rear, already recording on her phone for her Instagram story. "Finally," Laura said, removing her sunglasses with a dramatic flourish. "We've been waiting in the lobby for 10 minutes. Where is the event director? I have specific notes about the floral arrangements that need to be addressed immediately." I turned my chair around slowly. "Hello, Laura," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't just shock. It was a physical inability to process what they were seeing. Laura's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Tyler actually took a step back, bumping into Olivia, who lowered her phone, her mouth agape. "Alyssa?" "I work here," I said, standing up. Laura's face turned a mottled red. She recovered first, her arrogance overriding her confusion. "Well," she huffed, crossing her arms, "this is certainly awkward. But I suppose it's convenient. At least you know my tastes. Now, about the champagne. There won't be any champagne, Laura," I interrupted. My voice was cool, professional, and utterly devoid of the deference I used to show her. "In fact, there won't be a jubilee." "Excuse me?" Laura stepped forward, her voice rising. "You can't cancel my event just because you're petty. I have a contract. I paid the deposit." "Did you?" I asked. I picked up the file on the table and slid a single piece of paper across the mahogany surface. It stopped right in front of her. "That is the credit authorization form used to secure the venue," I said. "It's signed by me. Dated 2 weeks ago." Laura looked down at the paper. Then she looked at Olivia. Olivia went pale, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. "I didn't sign that," I continued. "I wasn't even in the state. Which means someone forged my signature to use my credit line. That's not just a policy violation, Laura. That's identity theft. It's a felony." Tyler looked from the paper to his mother, then to his sister. "Olivia?" he croaked. "You said you handled it." I just," Olivia stammered, backing away. "We filed a police report this morning," I said, motioning to the lawyer beside me, "and we've notified the fraud division of the credit card company. The reservation is canceled effective immediately due to fraudulent payment." You called the police?" Laura gasped, clutching her chest as if she were the victim. "On your own family?" "You're not my family," I said. "You made that very clear when you handed me divorce papers on my birthday." I looked at Tyler. He looked sick. "Alyssa, please, we can fix this." "It wasn't a mistake, Tyler. It was a crime. And you're an accessory if you knew about it." I didn't need to shout. Authority doesn't need volume. I turned to the head of security. "Please remove these guests from the property. They are trespassing." "Miss Vance," the guard said, stepping forward. "If you'll follow me." "You can't do this to me," Laura shrieked, her composure shattering completely. "Do you know who I am? I will ruin you. I will tell everyone." "Tell them what?" I asked, leaning forward, my hands flat on the table. "That you tried to throw a party you couldn't afford on your ex-daughter-in-law's stolen credit card? Go ahead, Laura. Tell them. I'd love to hear that story." She stared at me, her eyes wide with hate and fear. For the first time, she saw me. Not as a servant, not as a wallet, but as a wall she couldn't break down. She turned and stormed out, her heels clicking angrily on the marble. Olivia followed, sobbing. Tyler lingered for a second, looking at me with a mixture of regret and awe. I'm sorry," he whispered. "Goodbye, Tyler," I said. He turned and left. The heavy doors swung shut behind them, sealing out the noise, the drama, and the toxicity. I sat back down in my chair. The room was quiet again. The lawyer nodded at me respectfully. The security guard spoke into his radio. "Subject is leaving the premises." I looked out the window at the ocean. It was a beautiful day. The fallout wasn't immediate, but it was thorough. Like a building collapsing in slow motion. Laura's social empire disintegrated over the next few weeks. The Jubilee cancellation made the rounds first. When the invitations were rescinded, the rumors started. Then came the police report. People in high society love gossip more than they love their own children. And Laura had given them a feast. Her reputation wasn't just tarnished, it was incinerated. She was no longer the queen bee of the charity circuit. She was the woman who had committed fraud to pay for a party she couldn't afford. Tyler tried to call me a week later. I saw the notification on my blocked list log. He left a voicemail. "I didn't know it was illegal, Alyssa. I just thought, we're married. It's shared assets. I was just scared of her. You know how she gets. Can we talk? I miss you." I deleted it without listening to the end. Olivia's influencer career took a hit when the story leaked online. The comments on her videos shifted from adoration to accusations. She went private within days. Without my income, the apartment lease was broken. Tyler moved back in with Laura. The power couple image they had cultivated was gone, replaced by the reality of two broke adults living in a house they could barely heat. 3 months later, on a quiet Tuesday morning, I stood in the kitchen of my new condo. It was small, but it was mine. Paid for with my salary, furnished with my taste. I wasn't wearing a suit. I wasn't wearing an apron. I was in my pajamas, drinking coffee from a mug I had bought for myself. On the counter, a bowl of dough was rising. Sourdough, just for me. The sun streamed through the window, warm and honest. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who scrubbed floors for approval, who paid bills for love, who thought her value was determined by how useful she could be to people who despised her. We tell ourselves lies to survive. We tell ourselves that family is everything. We tell ourselves that loyalty means endurance. We think that if we just give a little more, sacrifice a little more, eventually they will love us back. But looking out at the city skyline, breathing in the smell of yeast and freedom, I realized the truth. Laura, Tyler, Olivia, they didn't have power because they were strong. They had power because I gave it to them. Their entire lifestyle, their confidence, their social standing. It was all a performance. Funded by my labor and my silence. It was an illusion. An empty wallet pretending to be a bank vault. Once the foundation left, the house fell. I punched down the dough, the soft resistance familiar under my hands. To anyone out there sitting at a table where they are mocked, paying bills for people who don't respect you, holding on to relationships that hurt because you're afraid of being alone. You think you need them to survive. You think you're nothing without them. But the truth is, they need you. They are terrified of the day you realize your own worth. So let them be terrified. Walk away. If you've ever had to walk away to find yourself, share this story. Hit subscribe, and let's remind the world. Our dignity is not negotiable.